So we can begin now. So welcome everyone. We can find my. Okay. So today I'm going to read from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 7, text number 9, and something about text number 10. Chapter 7 is called Knowledge of the Absolute. Punyo ganda prativyam cha tejas chasmi vivavaso jivanam sarabhuteshu tapas chasmi tapasvishu. Srila Prabhupada's translation and purport. I am the original fragrance of the earth. I am the heat and the fire. I am the life of all that lives. And I am the penance of all ascetics. Purport. Punya means that which is not decomposed. Punya is original. Everything is in the material world has a certain flavor or fragrance. Has a flavor and fragrance in a flower, or in the earth, in water, in fire, in air, etc. The uncontaminated flavor, the original flavor, which permeates everything, is Krishna. Similarly, everything has a particular original taste, and this taste can be changed by the mixture of chemicals. So everything original has some smell, some fragrance, and some taste. Vivasu means fire. Without fire, we cannot run factories, we cannot cook, etc. And that fire is Krishna. The heat and the fire is Krishna. According to Vedic medicine, indigestion is due to low temperature in the belly. So even for digestion, fire is needed. In Krishna consciousness, we become aware that earth, water, fire, air, and every active principle, all chemicals and all material elements are due to Krishna. The duration of life, man's life, is also due to Krishna. Therefore, by the grace of Krishna, man can prolong his life or diminish it. So Krishna consciousness is active in every sphere. So the Sanskrit and the translation again is Punyo ganda prativyam cha tejas chasmi vivavaso jivanam sarabhuteshu tapas chasmi tapasvishu. I'm the original fragrance of the earth. I'm the heat and fire, and the life of all that lives, and the penance of all ascetics. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Buddhaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskyadyade Siddharne. As we've heard many times, that the process of sadhana bhakti is the process of learning how to always remember Krishna and how to never forget him. Now, according to our philosophy, Krishna and everything about Krishna are non-different. Just like it says that not binat vat nama namino, that there's no difference between Krishna and Lord Krishna's name. So when we remember or say the word Krishna, or when we remember Krishna, or say the word Krishna, then we're immediately in contact with Krishna. And according to Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, Yoginam api sarvesham magdaten antaratmana sharavan bhajate yomam sameyuktatamo mataha. That anyone who's engaged in Krishna consciousness becomes the topmost yogi. There are many ways of associating with Krishna directly, through the chanting of his holy name, through the worship of the deities, through hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, from serving Krishna's devotees. This is a way that we naturally remember Krishna. And by remembering Krishna, we become Krishnaized. Just like if you put the iron in a fire, the iron gets hotter and hotter and hotter until it becomes just like fire. Now, it appears to be iron, but wherever you touch it, it'll act just like fire. For instance, if someone wants to enter into the sun planet, in our present body, it would not be possible. That one has to become like fire in order to enter into the sun planet and associate with the sun god. If someone wants to enter into the ocean, then they have to adapt themselves to the water and become acclimatized to the water. So similarly, if we want to intimately associate with Krishna, we have to take on the same spiritual nature of Krishna. We already are of the same spiritual nature of Krishna, but we become covered by material association, just like iron. So iron, when it's in its natural state, uncovered, then naturally it becomes attracted to a magnet. But when the iron becomes rusty, then the iron is no longer naturally attracted to the magnet. But if we purify the rust from the iron, then again, the iron will regain its natural attraction to the magnet. Similarly, by nature, we're attracted to Krishna, but because we're covered by the material contamination, therefore that natural attraction does not manifest itself. The process of sadhana bhakti is to uncover that natural attraction. And when that natural attraction becomes manifest, then the process of sadhana bhakti becomes successful. So the real thing is bhakti, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti priyachati. That if whatever we do it in devotion to please Krishna, bhakti mam avijanati, then that activity becomes perfect if Krishna is pleased by our devotion. But that devotion also requires a certain change of attitude. That our main material attitude is that we think that we're something special, that we don't recognize how much Krishna is special, or how much things in relation to Krishna are special. And therefore we conclude that we think ourselves special, and only those things in relationship to ourselves, namely this material body and things in relation to this body, they become special. That's because we don't understand how great Krishna is. And therefore we're proud of our whatever we have, although it may be very insignificant. Part of our hearing process is to discover just how wonderful and great Krishna is, and in comparison to him, try to develop some attitude of humility. As it says that Jnane priyasam utapasna namanta eva. Generally speaking, due to our minds being agitated by trying to figure out how to enjoy and control the material energy, therefore we can't perceive reality. What we perceive is what our mind is presenting to us in its agitated state. Therefore, Lord Brahma, he advises that we become namanta, submissive. Submissive to what? Shivanti Sanbukaritam Avadiyavartam, to the words of the great devotees, that we should take them seriously. And if we hear them and remember them and assimilate them, then we should conclude that Krishna is wonderful, that we're associating with him through all our different energies, all his different energies, and that we should serve him very faithfully and humbly. Just like when Srila Prabhupada was installing Rukmini Dwarkanath, there are different deities in Los Angeles. One of them is called Rukmini Dwarkanath. That are the little deities there. And Prabhupada, this is one of the first times Prabhupada installed Radha Krishna deities in an ISKCON temple. And as I mentioned before, Prabhupada at the end of his lecture, he was mentioning how we have to serve Rukmini Dwarkanath, how the devotees there should serve them, not thinking that Krishna, he's been invited there, and therefore we should serve him something like halava. At that time, halava was a very popular preparation in ISKCON. And Prabhupada said that not that we put raisins in the halava, and when Krishna sees the raisins, he has to eat the halava because he's attached to fruity halava. So Prabhupada said, Krishna doesn't need our fruity halava. And then he gave an example of Madan Mohan. So Madan Mohan, he was a deity that was in Vrindavan, and he was living in a house of a Brahmin. Now this Brahmin and his family happened to be quite advanced. And therefore, the deity was not just a Krishna as the deity, but he was actually, would manifest himself and even play with the Brahmin's children sometimes. One day, the Brahmin had a dream that a saintly person is going to come tomorrow, and I'd like you to give me to him because his name is Sanatana Goswami, and he's living all by himself, and he's my great devotee, and I'd like to live with him. So the Brahmin couldn't refuse, and he agreed. Next day, Sanatana Goswami, who was doing Madhukari. Madhukari means that the Brahmin, the saintly persons in Vrindavan at that time, there was no Loy Bazaar. There was no Fogal ashram. There was nothing but jungle. There weren't even any temples at that time. Madan Mohan, Sanatana Goswami, in order to just maintain his body and soul together, would do Madhukara, which means that they go begging to door, and it wasn't exactly a whole lot of doors together, and therefore one would not be able to get very much prasadam every day, but just enough to survive. So Sanatana Goswami was begging for some roti. Roti at that time didn't mean a nice chapati with butter on it or ghee. Roti means that whatever wheat the householder could grow, they grind into very coarse flour, add some water to it, make it into a round ball, and throw it into a fire. There were no ovens and stoves at that time. There was only some fire that they built. Now, the nature of a round ball made out of dough and being thrown into a fire is that part of it would get cooked and part of it would be raw. Part of it would be burnt and part of it would be simply unedible. In any case, Sanatana Goswami was getting some rotis every day, these kind of rotis. And so he was begging to that house of the Brahmin, and the Brahmin recognized Sanatana Goswami as the saintly person that Madan Mohan had told him was going to come the next day. That this Brahmin had heard from Madan Mohan in his dream. Therefore, he told about the dream to Sanatana Goswami and said Madan Mohan would like to go and live with you. But Sanatana Goswami said, my dear Brahmin, that this would not be very advisable because right now I have no place to live. I'm homeless. That right now I'm living underneath a tree. And there's no place that Madan Mohan could possibly live with me. I have no income. I have no source of maintenance. it would be very uncomfortable with Madan Mohan. But the Brahmin insisted. Madan Mohan said, I should give you to him. I should give him to you. So I must obey his order. So Sanatana Goswami took Madan Mohan, and since he was living underneath the tree, he put Madan Mohan on one of the branches. And then he'd go and beg some rotis for Madan Mohan to eat. So after some time, Madan Mohan started to complain. He said, my dear Sanatana Goswami, every day you're going out and begging some rotis and you're giving them to me. But number one, it's very uncomfortable living on this branch. Number two, couldn't you even offer a little salt on the roti? So Sanatana Goswami said, now you're asking for some salt. Soon you're going to ask for some sweets. And as Prabhupada said, I'm an old man. I can hardly move. Whatever I get, I offer to you. So kindly accept it. So Prabhupada said that Madan Mohan, he had to accept it because the Bhakta was offering it to him with love. And then Prabhupada said, but what is your worth? What is your offering? He said, it's nothing. That the real thing is bhakti. That Krishna, kindly take. I have no qualification. I have no devotion. I'm rotten and I'm fallen, but I'm offering this to you. And then Srila Prabhupada started to cry. And then he said, don't be puffed up. Always remember that you're dealing with Krishna. That is my advice to you. Thank you. So the major part of our philosophy is to accept how great Krishna is and how wonderful he is. The frog in the well can't imagine how great and how vast is the Atlantic Ocean. And in spite of his friends and friend informing him about the vastness of the ocean, still he cannot appreciate it because he's stuck in his well. So we have to be prepared to get out of our well of thinking that God may be this, God may be that, Krishna may be so great. And here in this verse, Krishna is giving us an opportunity to understand how we can see Krishna, even if we're not qualified to see him 24 hours a day in his holy name or perfectly in the deity form. So Lord Krishna recommends, if we cannot think of him 24 hours a day, we can see him in the varieties of this material world. And try to remember me in these varieties. Therefore, people say, can you show me Krishna? So Krishna is showing himself in so many different ways, but one has to have the eyes to see how Krishna is showing himself. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions that the foolish, ukramantam sthitim vapi, punjana vagunanditaha, vimuro nanapashyanti pashanti jnana chakshusha. That the foolish, they cannot understand how the living entity quits his body or what kind of body they enjoy under the spell of the modes of nature. But those whose eyes are trained with knowledge can see all this clearly. So here Krishna is giving us an example. And if we try to think about it, then we might be able to appreciate how Krishna is present in his manifestations. So he says, Punyo Ganda Prativyam Cha, that he's the Ganda, which is the smell in the earth, the flavor of the earth. So we know, for instance, a rose has a certain flavor, a certain aroma. And the rose is valued and appreciated because of the aroma. Now, where is that aroma coming from? It's coming from the earth. Is there a scientist who can take the earth and extract the aroma of a rose or any other flower? But Krishna in the next verse says, Bijamam samabhutanam that I'm the original seed of all creation. So Krishna is so intelligent that in unlimited numbers of seeds, he's put the potential to extract the aromas and the tastes of the earth. Let there be a scientist create their own seed, put it in the earth, and create a rose flower. That they can't do. They can genetically modify what's existing and make it worse, but they can't duplicate what Krishna has done, which is perfect. So as soon as you, by Krishna's arrangement, that as soon as you put a seed of a rose or any other kind of flower into the earth and put some water, it comes out and naturally extracts the flavor from the earth and the color and everything. But not only it creates, for instance, one tree, but it can create unlimited trees from that one tree. Let us see someone create a watch, and that watch creates other watches. Is there such a thing? You create, someone, scientist creates a watch, and from the watch, many other watches come. Just like the example is that one day, Narada Muni, as you've heard before, was walking on this planet. And he came across one Brahmin. And the Brahmin was very happy to see Narada Muni and welcomed him. And he said, my dear Narada Muni, where are you going? And Narada Muni said, I'm going to Vaikuntha. Oh, very nice. While you're in Vaikuntha, can you kindly ask Narayan when I'm going to go back to the spiritual world, to Vaikuntha? Narada Muni said, no problem. I could probably ask him that. Narada Muni continued on this planet, and he came across one cobbler, one shoemaker. A shoemaker in the Vedic culture is not considered a very elevated service, occupation, because they deal with dead skins. There were no vegan shoes at that time. And therefore, when Narada Muni came to this cobbler, the cobbler asked Narada Muni that I heard you're going to Vaikuntha. When you go there, can you kindly ask him when I'm going to go back and see my Lord to Vaikuntha? Narada Muni agreed. And after, when he was in Vaikuntha, because Narada Muni can go anywhere he wants. And when he was in Vaikuntha, he was discussing different things with Lord Narayan. And finally, he asked him about the Brahmin and the cobbler when they're going back to the spiritual world. The Supreme Lord said, oh, the Brahmin, he won't come back until many, many births have gone by. And the cobbler, oh, he's coming back in this very lifetime. So Narada Muni was very surprised. But Lord Narayan saw the surprise on Narada Muni's face and said, if they ask you what I was doing, just tell them that I was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. When Narada Muni came back to the earth planet, he met the Brahmin. And the Brahmin said, oh, Narada Muni, so nice to see you. Long time no see. Have you been to Vaikuntha? Yes, I was there. Did you talk to Lord Narayan? Yes, we had a very nice conversation. We even took prasadam together. So, did you ask him when I'm coming back to the spiritual world? Narada Muni said, yes, certainly I did. I didn't forget. So tell me when I'm going back to the spiritual world. Oh, bad news. Not after many, 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 many lifetimes will you go back to the spiritual world. What? Do you know who I am? This is an insult. This is an offense against Brahmins. I'm a Brahmin. I'm a pure Brahmin. How is it possible? Wait a second. Maybe you're just lying to me. Maybe you never went to Vaikuntha. maybe you never talked to Lord Narayan. Tell me, my dear Narada Muni, what was Lord Narayan doing when you were talking to him in Vaikuntha? Oh, Lord Narayan is just doing his usual thing. He was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. What? That's ridiculous. It's not possible to thread an elephant through an eye of a needle. You never saw Narayan. Get out of here. Go away. Don't bother me. Namaste. Narada Muni left. And he came across the cobbler. And the cobbler was very happy to see Narada Muni and said, my dear Narada Muni, so good to see you. So long time no see. Tell me, how was your stay in Vaikuntha? Oh, it was very nice. Lord Narayan was very happy. I was very happy to see Lord Narayan. And did you ask him a question about when I'm going back to Vaikuntha? And Narada Muni said, yes, I asked him. And he said, you're going back in this very lifetime. Oh, fantastic. That's great. Thank you so much. Good news. Tell me, Narada Muni, what was my Lord doing while you were talking to him? Oh, he was just threading an elephant through the eye of a needle. Wow, fantastic. My Lord is so great. He can do anything. Wait a second, Narada Muni said. Do you actually believe me when I said Lord Narayan was threading an elephant through the eye of a needle? Of course, why not? My Lord could take a little seed of a banyan tree, put it into the earth, grow a big banyan tree, and from that one banyan tree, thousands and thousands of other banyan trees can come. So if my Lord could put thousands and thousands of banyan trees, huge banyan trees, in this little seed, what's the problem for him to thread an elephant through the eye of a needle? Therefore, a devotee's faith in Krishna is not blind, but based upon the wonderful things that are already before us. When we look in the sky and see this fiery globe called the sun floating in the sky, and according to the scientists at least, that this planet, according to their estimation, is just a fraction of the size of the sun. And yet this huge sun floats in the sky and gives us unlimited heat and light. Just like Lord Brahma says in the Brahma Samhita, Yats Chaksha Esha Savita Sakala Grahanam Rajasamasa Suramurti Sheshateja Yas Yagaya Brahmati Samrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purusham Tamang Bhajami. That it's Chaksha Esha Savita Sakala Grahanam. That the sun is just one of the eyes of the Supreme Lord. And the sun is full of unlimited effulgence. And that effulgence and that light, that heat, are being given off throughout the universe since time immemorial, since the creation. And yet, the sun is exactly in an orbit. The example is given a bull. A bull is a very powerful animal, and it can pull a very heavy weight that 50 strong men would have a hard time pulling. Now, the bulls in India, at least, traditionally we use to plow the fields and also to grind grains. They attach the bull by its nose to a pole with a rope, and then they attach a very heavy weight to that would roll, of course, to the bull, and the bull would walk around in a circle where they put the grains, and the heavy weight would crush all the grains. So although this bull was so powerful that it was able to pull a weight that 50 strong men would have a hard time pulling, still, because it's attached to a rope, to a pole, the bull cannot move 1 inch beyond the rope. Similarly, the sun, although it's full of infinite light and heat, gives us exactly the amount of heat and light necessary to sustain our existence on this planet. If the sun moved a little closer to the earth, then everything would be cooked. You wouldn't need a stove or an oven or a fire to cook the chapatis. You just put it outside and everything would be fried. You'd have fried chapatis immediately. And if the sun moved a little further away from the earth, everything would be frozen. You wouldn't need a refrigerator because we'd all be in a refrigerator. But by Krishna's arrangement, everything, the sun, although it's so powerful and so vast, still it stays exactly in an orbit and doesn't come any closer or any further away from the earth. Therefore, Lord Brahma is glorifying Krishna because he makes such wonderful arrangements. Now, if the scientists can make even a fraction of that arrangement or do something similar, then they could put a little tiny sun over the North Pole and have it circulate and help out the Eskimos. Or at least they could make a little tiny sun and give one to everyone. And during the winter, we wouldn't have to pay for electricity. And for heating, we'd have a little sun circulate in our house. And maybe you go into another room at night so we could go to sleep. But the scientists, they can't do anything like that. All they can do is say everything has come about by accident, but they cannot create even a very small accident that would be helpful to us compared to the unlimited manifestation of the sun, which is providing heat and light to the entire creation. So everything is coming from Krishna, all this, the sun, the light, the heat, all the energies. Krishna says, Punyam Bhumir Apanalo Vayu Kamano Buddha Evacha. At the beginning of this chapter, Krishna mentions, I'm going to tell you about everything. I'm going to summarize everything, practically in 3 verses. All the material energy comes from me. All the souls are my expansions. And I'm the source of everything, the souls and the material energy. That's all the knowledge that one really needs to become perfect. Of course, accepting it is something different, but everything comes from Krishna. That's our philosophy. But that doesn't mean, like the Mayavadis, that because everything comes from Krishna, therefore Krishna has lost himself in his creation. That surely the electric light is caused by Krishna, therefore the electric lamp is Krishna. But that doesn't mean because the light, the tree, the seed, or the color, or the flavor comes from Krishna, he has spread himself out into everything, and therefore he's finished. No more Krishna. So this is a material conception. It's a conception of the Mayavadis. God has expanded himself everywhere, and therefore Krishna has disappeared. But Krishna is not like that. Although he's always complete, although he expands himself, as it says in the Ishupanishad and the invocation, Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vishishate. Although Krishna has expanded himself in different manifestations, still he remains complete himself. He can expand himself unlimitedly, like he did in the case with Lord Brahma. When Lord Brahma stole the cowherd boys that Krishna was playing with and the calves, then Lord Krishna, in order to not disappoint the residents of Vrindavan, expanded himself into so many calves and so many cowherd boys. And for 1 year, in those expansions, Krishna lived in Vrindavan. And it's said that because there were plenary expansions of Krishna, although they're apparently cowherd boys or calves, but they were actually Krishna himself. And of course, the residents of Vrindavan loved Krishna. And their love for him was great, even greater than that of their own children. And the cows loved Krishna more than they loved their own calves. But for 1 year, the love of the cowherd women and the cowherd men for their children expanded as much as it expanded for Krishna. Similarly, the love of the cows for their calves expanded equally as their love for Krishna. Later on, of course, we know that Brahma came back, and Krishna showed Brahma that all these cowherd boys and the calves were actually plenary expansions of Krishna. And they manifested themselves as plenary Narayan forms. And Lord Brahma was completely bewildered by this display of unlimited opulence. So Krishna can expand himself unlimitedly and still he remains Krishna. That in the spirit, here in the material world, that 1 minus 1 is equal to 0, but in the spiritual world, with Krishna, 1 minus 1 is still equal to 1. So that's Krishna's potency. So although we say that everything is expansion of Krishna's energy, we're not pantheists and say because Krishna has expanded himself everywhere, therefore Krishna has disappeared. No, Krishna is the cause of everything, but he's still in Goloka Vrindavan. Goloka Nami Nidadami Tale Chatasya. He's still in Vrindavan enjoying his pastimes with his associates there. So this is called Achintya Beta Beta. Krishna doesn't say we worship a lamp because it's Krishna. He says to worship him. Mamekam Sharanam Vraja, not the varieties. Now here it's mentioned tapasya in this verse. Tapasyasmi tapasvishu. So tapasya means those who are seeking eternal happiness, or tapasvi means those who are seeking eternal happiness. So real tapasya is divyam, divine. Divine means, divya means transcendental. As it says in the Bhagavatam, Dipo divyam putraka yena sadvam. That when one is striving for spiritual life and follows the instructions of Krishna, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and accepts some voluntary inconvenience of the body in order to make spiritual advancement, that is called tapasya. Just like fasting on Ekadasi day or any other auspicious day. So that tapasya is good even for health, and what to speak of advancing in Krishna consciousness. So our preliminary tapasya includes no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, no meat eating. Dipo divyam putraka yena sattvam. So if we want to purify our existence, because at the moment our existence is not purified and we're suffering, therefore we have to accept these types of tapasya. Now Hiranyakashipu, he also accepted a very severe type of tapasya. As we all know, Hiranyakashipu wanted to become immortal. Therefore, he stood on the tip of his toes for 120 years of the demigods. His tapasya was so great that in spite of the fact that the insects were eating his body, and therefore the insects, the ants, the moths, the worms, were continuously eating his body, so much so that after some time, the only thing was left was some bones. And Hiranyakashipu was such an advanced personality that he knew how to take shelter and live in his bones, even though he didn't have a gross body, practically speaking. He only had some bones to live in. But his tapasya was for some material gain, and therefore it was not really real tapasya. So real tapasya means to accept voluntarily some inconvenience in order to obtain eternal happiness. Now, the Krishna consciousness movement is meant for teaching divine tapasya. Of course, Prabhupada said our process is very simple and divine, that our tapasya in this age is chanting, dancing, and feasting. But even that is too much for some people to accept. Because chanting should be done inoffensively in order to be effective. Similarly, taking prasadam should be done with devotion. And dancing is not a rock dance, it's not a ballroom dance, it's a divine dance, like Prabhupada used to dance. So if we learn how to chant, and we learn how to take prasadam, and we learn how to dance in ecstasy, then that's the only tapasya required in this age. But in order to focus our attention, to rely upon Krishna, to take shelter of him, sometimes we perform other tapasyas, like fasting on auspicious days, and preaching the movement of serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Sankirtan movement. Srila Prabhupada was especially impressed when the devotees, they underwent all kinds of inconvenience by distributing his books, Transcendental Knowledge, to the people in general. In spite of the weather, the freezing weather, or the scorching heat, or other problems like with government officials, or the attitude of people they encountered, the tolerance for that was displayed by such devotees in the cause of trying to spread Krishna consciousness was much appreciated by Krishna and by Srila Prabhupada. And if we actually spend our existence trying to see Krishna and serve Krishna and tolerate the inconveniences that we encounter in the course of our devotional service, even if we sit down to chant Hare Krishna, we'll find our mind is not so accommodating most of the time. And therefore that's kind of divine tapasya, trying to tolerate our own minds, not become distracted by them. Instead, concentrating on the holy name, like Lord Brahma did. Lord Brahma's tapasya, he wasn't fasting on the lotus flower because there's nothing to eat anyhow. It was just him and the lotus flower. And Lord Brahma was not going to eat the lotus flower he was sitting on. Otherwise, he didn't have a place to sit. The only thing he had to do was meditate on tapa. And by such meditation on the mantra that Krishna had given him, because he had heard the mantra from Garbhodakshay Vishnu, he was able to realize Krishna and see the spiritual world. Similarly, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we concentrate our minds and we chant this with some devotion, happily asking Srimati Radharani and Lord Krishna to engage us in their loving service, because there's no question of being morose and being engaged in Krishna's loving service. A loving service begins after liberation, when there's no more anxiety, there's no more hankering, and there's no more lamentation. There's no more resentment against other living entities. One can happily, lovingly chant the holy name with some feeling and attention, and therefore Krishna enter into a very intimate relation with Srimati Radharani and Krishna, in the feelings of separation that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has displayed and has given us the opportunity to develop ourselves through the Sankirtan movement. So if we do that, Tesham Sadatam Yuktanam, try to keep connected with Krishna through this process that Krishna has given us, then Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Krishna will give us the intelligence so that wherever we look, we'll be able to see Krishna and remember him, and therefore keep in the fire of Krishna consciousness. So we cannot cheat Krishna. Krishna is in our heart. He's seeing our attention, everything, our intentions, our purposes, our activities, everything. So we should be sincere and try to serve him. He will certainly accept our service and give us intelligence so that we can see him everywhere, always, under all circumstances, always be engaged in the mood of service to him, and therefore our lives will become successful. So thank you. Are there any questions?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, the question in group from Mother.
From who? This is in the chat. Okay. Question from Ekanga Dasi. Happy birthday. Dinraj Dinya. Shislev Dinraj Dinya. Question from Ekangi Devidas. Sometimes devotees make extraneous efforts in caring for Tulsi. They use chemical fertilizers or pest control products, after which Tulsi leaves and manjaris come not safe to be eaten. They're also not offered to Krishna. Subject Tulsi to dry, waterless regimen to kill parasites in the soil, making Tulsi suffer. How to take proper care of Tulsi so as not to go to the extremes? Good question. I mean, I'm not an expert at Tulsi worship, but I'm sure that there are other types of things you can give to Tulsi which will not be so poisonous. Tulsi has survived since time immemorial. Before they had pesticides, insecticides, peoplecides, and all kinds of sides. So if Tulsi could have survived, I'm sure there's safer things we can give to Tulsi to protect them. As far as parasites in the soil, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert at parasites, but I'm sure there's ways of taking care of the parasites that don't mean that we have to torture Tulsi in order to do it. Otherwise, we may be doing things that are worse than the parasites. Tulsi may prefer the parasites to our treatment to her. They may be acting with more devotion than we are. Anything else? We have Slishna. Who can see your message? Any other questions? If you have a question, you can. How do they ask a question? Raise your hand or? Yes, Shiva Tattva.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You talk about tapasya. I heard somewhere too much tapasya hardens the heart. Can you comment on that? So, in which way?
Well, most of us don't have to worry. Some of us have to worry about too much tapasya, but usually most of us have to worry about not enough of it. In any case, the type of tapasya it's referring to, probably refers to it, in the Nectar of Devotion, is the type of tapasya that the Mayavadis undergo. They want to hear, for instance, when the Mayavadis heard that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing, chanting, and feasting, they considered him to be a pseudo-sannyasi. Because for the Mayavadi sannyasis, what they do is simply, they try to fast as much as possible. They try to refrain from any kind of activity. They only hear about Brahman. So that type of dry speculation about Brahman, of that denying the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the possibility of utilizing our present senses in His service by offering Him food, by dancing for His pleasure, or serving Him with our present senses, that type of renunciation is considered to be Palgu Vairagya Uchite, according to Rupa Goswami. Anasaktasya Vishayan Itarhum Upayunjitehe Nirbandha Yukta Vairagya Nirbandha Sambandha Yukta Vairagya Uchite. That actual renunciation is Yukta Vairagya, utilizing Krishna's energies in Krishna's service. That's the best renunciation. But if someone denies Krishna's existence, denies the opportunity to utilize Krishna's energies in Krishna's service, and tries to renounce the material world without any knowledge of Krishna or his devotional service, simply gives up sense gratification without any understanding what devotional service is, then that's considered to be Palgu Vairagya Uchite, artificial renunciation. And such artificial renunciation will simply make one less and less inclined to devotional service to Krishna. Anything else?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, one question in Zoom in Russian. Mataji Lavangalatana will translate and write to group. 1 second.
Hare Krishna, Pachimu Krishna, Pazvan Yayat, Slu Chayatsa, Chemuto, Plachchomu Sa, Pre Dan Nimi. Hare Krishna. Why does Krishna allow bad things to happen to devotees, like attacks on devotees in temples? Aren't they observing tapasya there? Well, that's part of the tapasya. Nothing happens by accident. Otherwise, how can we explain the life of Prahlad Maharaj? Wasn't he a sincere devotee? Why did his father throw him underneath the feet of an elephant? What did he do wrong? Why was he being tortured by his father's friends, the demons? Why did his mother feed him poison? For Prahlad, because he was a sincere devotee, he actually took further and further refuge in Krishna in spite of these problems that come about. As Lord Brahma says, Tatenu kampam susamikshamano punjana evatma kritam vipakam ridbag vapuhir vidadamanaste divete san muke de dayabak. That no one should think, no conditions living, even an aspiring devotee, should think that they're completely free from all reactions of their activities. Otherwise, if we were free from all reactions to our activities, why do we misidentify ourselves with these gross and subtle material bodies that we're now encompassed by? Therefore, Tatenu Kampam, praying for the devotee is praying for Krishna's mercy, and Tatenu Kampam Susamikshamano, so that we can see things properly. Su means nicely, Iksha means to see, Mana with a mind and intelligence. Susamikshamano. Iksha means intelligence, Mana means with a mind, so we can understand things properly. So what does that proper understand? Punjana evatma kritam vipakam. That we're in the material world, it's a place of suffering. And sometimes, and why are we suffering? Because of our past misdeeds. Now, Krishna sometimes arranges so that we can experience some of that suffering. And that suffering hopefully inspires us to take shelter of Krishna. And by taking shelter of Krishna, we become Krishna conscious. There's no other way that we're going to become Krishna conscious unless we take shelter of Krishna voluntarily, consciously. Therefore, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita in the 13th chapter, in the last of in the purport, he says, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi Dukkha Dosha Anudarshana. That birth, death, old age, and disease, these are the doshas, these are the problems of material existence. They're inevitable. They're unavoidable. And they're there to help the devotee take shelter of Krishna. Because without understanding the miseries of old age, disease, and death, and having to take birth again, then there's real no impetus to take shelter of Krishna. So these attacks on devotees, these problems in the temples, our very existence is problematic. It's not that sometimes some devotee may die, but it's not that we're going to live forever. We all have to die, today or tomorrow. Our life is so short that even the demigods are amazed that we take it seriously, that we think we're going to live here for so long. And yet our life is just like, it's a flash. Even Lord Brahma's life is a flash, what to speak of our life. But if under the circumstances we're placed in, we take shelter of Krishna, sincerely take shelter of him, then our life becomes ever more successful in Krishna consciousness. And therefore, as Queen Kunti said, therefore there'll be no more seeing a repeated birth and death. If we look at it, that why are the devotees suffering? Everyone is suffering here in the material world simply due to forgetfulness of Krishna. And if some circumstances forces us to remember Krishna, then those circumstances are actually helping us ending our suffering. And therefore they're welcome, because they actually give us eternal happiness rather than perpetual suffering in the material world. So Queen Kunti prayed for problems. We're fortunate, as I've said many times, we don't have to pray for problems. Kali Yuga is sending them to us one after another, so we can take shelter of Krishna more sincerely. So we don't have to see any more problems by going back to the spiritual world. Niti Seva, did you have a question?
Hare Krishna Gurudev, please accept my humble obeisance. Prabhupada. Yes, I have a question. So, for example, I understand the concept of karmas, even with us as aspiring devotees, we also have some karma, and we do get it. So for example, if somebody has already, got their karma back, but if the same thing is being repeated again and again and again, so is it that Krishna is trying to teach us a lesson and we have not learned that lesson yet, or I don't know what it is. Can I sorry, for example, let's say if somebody if there is a devotee and somebody came, and just giving an example, somebody came and stole anything valuable he had, so he understands, okay, that was my karma and I must have done something like that in my previous life, that's how I have got it. But then same thing happens with him again and again. So
Well, there's many possibilities. One is that in his last lifetime or in previous lifetimes, he was a professional thief. Therefore, he had a lot of people coming to steal from him again, take back their things. The other possibility is not very intelligent, doesn't keep his things very safely. And therefore, he becomes a victim. There are many, many possibilities. In any case, the devotee knows that nothing belongs to him. And therefore, in one form or another, Krishna is simply coming to take back what belongs to Krishna in some form or another. But the devotee is intelligent enough, he knows that this is Krishna's property, and therefore he protects it carefully so that thieves are not coming to take things unnecessarily. But just like Vasudeva and Kamsa, when Vasudeva could not pacify Kamsa because Kamsa wanted to kill his wife, Devaki, Vasudeva utilized his intelligence to the full extent that he could. But ultimately, when he couldn't pacify Kamsa and he had to save his wife, Devaki, he used his intelligence to the best he could, but ultimately he offered that he would give the children that were born of Devaki to Kamsa. So Prabhupada said, we use our intelligence in Krishna's service to the extent that we can, but we can't be blamed if inevitably we're not the controllers and things happen to us beyond our capacity to actually prevent. But if we have the capacity to prevent them, and we don't utilize it, it's because we're foolish and we don't take Krishna's property seriously. But if things are inevitably being taken from us, there's little we can do but to remember Krishna and not be attached to them and understand that ultimately everything is under Krishna's control and has some purpose behind it. All right.
I understand.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Gurudev, I understand your answer, but this is not just the situation with somebody stealing. It was just like, an example, but there are situations in, our lives. So many things can happen, but then sometimes, like, that's what I mean, like something can be repeated like so many times, and then sometimes I don't understand like why it is happening. I understand this is because of my karma. It's not gonna happen just by chance. But then one thing being repeated again over and over, and then it's like
Oh, after
I
a
don't
while,
know.
you'll get used to it. If you take shelter of Krishna, then you'll actually become more and more deeply absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Then you can welcome it. I remember one time I had a wart on the bottom of my foot, right in the kidney point. When I tried to get it removed in so many different ways, I couldn't do it. So I went to an orthopedist, whatever it is, someone, a podiatrist. And he took this enormous needle and stuck it into my foot. And it was so painful that I had no choice but to meditate on Prabhupada in order to escape the pain. Lo and behold, the wart came back after some time after it was removed. And I had to go back to the same podiatrist, took the same needle and stuck it into my foot. But this time I was prepared to meditate upon Prabhupada. And therefore I was actually even more deeply absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So although it was a very unpleasant experience, but it was a very helpful experience to learn how to meditate on Prabhupada. So if we have some experience that's happening again and again, and we continuously take shelter of Krishna and his pure devotees, then that experience will turn out to be the best experience of our existence. But it takes practice. But if we could avoid that experience, if it's not necessary, then we should try to use our intelligence how to avoid it. But if it's unavoidable, then we should remember Krishna and Prabhupada. And that way deepen our Krishna consciousness. All right, we'll stop there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanande.
Спасибо
Hare Krishna.
большое.
С вами Махарадж Ки.
Да,
Bye.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.